Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Velero community meeting. Today is June 1st, 2021. I would like you all, if you could, please add yourself to the attendee list here so we know who's attending these. I'm going to talk about some status updates, and then we have some discussion topics about OpenShift. So that's going to be interesting. Let's kick things off with some status updates. We'll start with Carlicia.
Yes, I cleaned up the last week's release boards as far as what my tasks were and moved things to the new release, not release, I'm sorry, sprint. And what I'm doing is updating this document, which is way overdue. That's it.
Oops. Okay, well, let's see. I was on vacation the last 2 weeks, so I'm back to catching up, and we're back onto the upload progress monitoring this week, and start kicking that forward.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, does anyone have any questions for Calicia as well around the Carvel configuration here? No? All right, and Dave, welcome back. Glad to have you back. All right, Bridget.
Hi, everyone. So last week I had what I felt was a great meeting with Fong and Scott to discuss the plugin versioning design doc. I felt like there were a few comments to be added, but I think everyone seemed on board with the general direction that was going. So I'm currently in the process of incorporating those comments and also creating the PR for the actual design docs, but to the repo, so I should have that up later today.
Sounds good. And I have the recording there as well, so you can add that to the PR information.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Well, I'll get that uploaded right after this.
Awesome, thanks.
And just so for my own understanding, so you've created the doc, you have a PR to incorporate changes, and once that PR is accepted, then the design doc is set, and then the actual the development work begins.
Yes, I think so.
Cool. Just trying to understand the process.
That's the general process. So I usually we will create the design doc initially in GitHub and have the discussion PRs on the PR there. But I tried out Google Docs just because I feel like it's easier to iterate on it and get other people's feedback more easily incorporated. So I think the design doc that's in Google Docs is mostly complete. So yes, it's just a matter of putting it into Markdown now, and then we'll do a breakdown of the next steps within that, and then that should be the design ready to go. And then we can start making progress.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks for advancing that work.
No problem. Thanks to Scott and Fong for their input. I felt like it was a good meeting, so thanks for coming along and chatting about it.
Okay, sounds good. Any other questions for Bridget? All right. Let's dive into the discussion topics. Fong.
Yeah, thank you about this. This is more like an OpenShift issues, but I think that's Scott here, so we can talk about it here. And also, I also raised a concern about that, was that when we back up a namespace in OpenShift, that it executes an OpenShift plugin, and we observe that in some namespace it have a lot of resources that OpenShift is listening to and we need it. So as a consequence, we can see that the total time to back up a namespace, even though it have no PVC, it's significantly larger than to execute a backup of the similar namespace in a non-OpenShift environment. For example, when we back up a namespace with 2,000 secrets, and on a normal cluster, and the sorry. So and a similar namespace on OpenShift, we can see significantly different between a few seconds of total backup time to minutes, many minutes, like maybe 6 or 7 minutes of total backup time. So that is how significant it is. And I look into the OpenShift and I plug in, I saw that the common plugin being executing, the common backend being executed, and that is something that I will follow up with maybe Scott. If Scott have an answer, then you can go ahead and answer here. But that is something that I saw. But that is just like specific for OpenShift. However, the general concern is this: when we have a cluster and we're being backup, and if the plugin happen to register on the wrong type, for quote unquote, right, on the wrong type of entry, so that it's somehow being executing on each of these items, that cause the total time, because we are backing up Velero in in linear, right? We don't backing up item in parallel, so the total backup time of the whole namespace being linearly dependent on this plugin, and it might take a very long time for backup to being executed. If there's any way that we can somehow, right now, I don't think we have a total timeout for the backup, or so. If there's any way we can do some more statistics to kind of show up, like when we look at the backup, right, we can say how long it takes to back up the specific type of item or anything like that. That is so it's kind of help the developer when we look at the backup. It says certainly it see that the Velero backup, for example, take like 10 minutes, 20 minutes to back up some namespace compared to other namespace. Can we have some way for developer to see, hey, this is backup that long because we're spending so much time on this, on that, or something like that. So that is something that I just like a more like an concern more than any question or anything like that. Yeah. What do you guys think?
I guess I'll jump in first. I think it sounds like, first of all, there's two different things you're talking about. The second thing you said was, in general, is there a way of looking at the backup to say, where did the time get spent? Can we add some tools or some diagnostics along the way somewhere to kind of give a better idea of whether certain plugins or certain aspects of the Velero backup are taking longer than others? But to go back to the first point, I would say it sounds like what you're talking about is not so much an OpenShift issue as a specific, plugin issue, which is to say that our OADP third-party OpenShift plugins, you mentioned the common plugin, that's one that we use to set some annotations on all resources to kind of give us some general information that some of the plugins need in terms of the OpenShift version for backup and restore, and we're setting registry information for the images. And so it might be interesting to see, because you're saying non-OpenShift takes, a few seconds and OpenShift takes several minutes. It sounds to me like it's this plugin probably that you're dealing with rather than, running Velero on OpenShift. So it might be interesting to see if you run a backup without our plugins on OpenShift, you might see that same few seconds. In other words, let's figure out whether we're talking on an OpenShift performance question or a plugin performance question.
Do you think it's a good idea to open like an issue on OpenShift OADP and then discuss about that specific?
I think that's probably the right place for that. I mean, it's good to bring it up here. And I think your second point is relevant to the Velero upstream community. But I think the specific concern with that plugin, I think it may be an OADP issue. There may be some aspects to that, because what we're doing is setting some annotations on every resource. And I don't know if it's just because we're calling save on everything and maybe there's not much we can do about that, or if there's certain things that plugin is doing that are slower that could be improved performance-wise. So that's something to look into. For example, just looking at this now, I know that some of this has to do with, the image registry locations and all that. We don't necessarily need to set that on everything. We can probably limit that functionality to certain resource types, and we wouldn't need them on secrets. There may be other things there that we need. I guess we just need to look into it. So one possibility would be to get this plugin, figure out a way to streamline it to take less time. Although I suspect if you're saving, every resource, modifying every one, that could still be a performance that we need to look into. Do we need to do this for everything? I know when we created this plugin, we wanted it to do, we needed some of these annotations on more than one resource type. And so, when you're not doing it on just one resource type, the next easiest thing is to do everything. And maybe that we need a more targeted approach that is certain resource types needed. I'm just not sure off the top of my head. I'll have to look into that offline. We may be able to reduce the number of resources that we apply this plugin to. That could help. Or we may need to streamline the actions within the plugin. But I think either way, that's an aspect to look into. Go ahead and enter an issue on the OADP. Things that definitely something to look into.
I think the number of registry, the number of type that the plugin register to is important here, because each of these plugin is an gRPC execution, right? That's a network call. If we register it wrong, and it can be executed or too frequently, unnecessarily.
I would say when you put that issue in, provide some information as to how to reproduce that on our side as well. This kind of resources, this many, this is the difference that you've seen, so that because there also could be environment questions that it may be specific to your environment, or it may be all open to different environments. Just we'll look into that. I think your second point about what are the ways to look at where Velero is spending its time in a backup restore is a general question that's probably worth talking to the kind of the overall Velero team here. Be interesting to see if anyone has any input there.
The reason why I raised the second question is when I actually debug an issue, and I see item, I'm back in item, I don't know how long it takes to expand in this, and I have to look into the logs of each of these item and see how long it takes to executing this plugin and measuring it and so on and so forth. It's a painful process, especially when you're looking at like 2,000 items in the namespace, right? Hopefully we can have some kind of, I don't know whether we have some kind of a statistics, analyze, give us some, more info about the backup.
Well, we've got a bunch of stuff on sitting in the backlog of like metrics and stuff. So we could add in more like internal stats metrics. I think that'd be worthwhile. And we can put that up there. And I think the current plan is use Prometheus, and I haven't actually used Prometheus. So would like Prometheus metrics give us the kind of stuff we're looking for here, or should we be looking at a different mechanism for tracking this kind of stuff?
Let's just say in my case, right? We can talk about my case first, and then we can try to generalize to make sure it help many other people in the community. So one specific in my case, like I want to interest in how long it takes Velero. How long the Velero backup span in the gRPC call, in the network call that it interact with, right? So let's just say if the total time that is spent on gRPC call was accumulate to about 80% of the backup time, and it is something like significant, right? And I think in my example, without making gRPC call, if I'm backing up in a normal cluster, it's only take like a few seconds to back up the whole namespace with 2,000 secret. But if I do exactly the same namespace in the OpenShift, it takes many minutes. Then I would like to be able to have some statistic that quickly point to, hey, you spend too much time in gRPC call, something like that. It would be nice.
So we're not writing a stats package. That's off the table. So my question is, would Prometheus kind of solve this problem? Does anybody have experience with Prometheus? And if not, what else would be something that we could use in this case?
So it's been a long time. So I've used Prometheus on previous projects in the past, but like my understanding is that it's more for like looking at the performance of like a process over like a long period of time. And so it's how do you break down the individual metrics to be assigned to like a particular backup. And I think that as you add in more, I'm trying to remember all the Prometheus terms, but like if you add in more labels to say this Prometheus metric is associated with like this metric for this backup. As you add more of those, I think that impacts the overall Prometheus performance. So it's like you don't want to introduce too many different labels for like different metrics. So I think it's probably better for like you could gather more information, like how long do backups on this Velero installation take in general, rather than this specific backup took this much time, or this specific backup took or spent this much time in gRPC calls, for example. But I could go back through previous things and try to remember like the particular complexities of Prometheus. It's been a while since I've worked with it, but it's my vague recollection.
No, I think this is a good idea in general. So I'll go ahead and kick in just just a ticket to track it. But what we really need is for someone to dig in and say, what would actually, how can we actually get these metrics to display them? Because certainly it's pretty easy to spit out a log message, but as you're saying, Fong, it's kind of a pain to deal with. So if there's some system that we could plug into, that would be good.
One other thing to point into here that might be relevant is that I know we did some similar, we had some concerns with our conveyor migration project, and one of the guys on our team, Derek, ended up using Jaeger tracing to be able to sort of get some idea of this section took this many seconds or this many milliseconds, and kind of putting that instrumentation in place. I wasn't really involved in that effort, but that was something that helped us to figure out. I think in our case, the big takeaway for the first round of improvement came from looking into sort of Kubernetes client caching in terms of tweaking that. But that kind of approach may be relevant here again, especially in this question of is the bottleneck the gRPC calls, or is the bottleneck some other point, and kind of which function calls are really spending the bulk of the time in some of these long backups and restores.
Yeah, the gRPC calls themselves, should be ordered, especially these are local loop back. Yeah. Less than a millisecond each.
Right.
So.
And it is, I don't know that it's the calls. I suspect there may be, in this particular example, there's probably a combination of some efficiencies needed to be incorporated into that plugin action itself, with the fact that we might need to tweak it a bit and not call that plugin action as many times. But again, the general question of, having to track this down to say, why is this migration taking 10 minutes? Where is the time being spent? That would be useful to have some kind of an instrumentation available here to help with that debugging. What
was the name of that package you mentioned?
Jaeger, I guess it's pronounced. It's just JAEGER.
Okay.
Yep.
Yep. Drank too much of that stuff in college.
And I can talk to Derek about it. He's on PTO right now to get some idea of how that might be relevant on the site as well. As I said, I've looked at SBR, but I really wasn't involved in actually putting that in place.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
All right, so do we have a path forward here?
Sounds like it. We're going to investigate a bit. We have to come up with a plan for plan.
Sounds good. Does anyone have anything else to add to that discussion topic? All right. Does anyone have anything else they want to add to the meeting today? All right. Then we're going to cut it short. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a fantastic rest of the week. Talk to you all soon. Bye.
See you later.